Okay, so we are live on Facebook and YouTube. And they go ahead and send it live. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay, well, welcome and thanks for joining us for our October Global Data Vault webinar. I'm going to move the slides along. I am Trista Pro, Director of Marketing for Global Data Vault, and I'm kicking off this next episode in our Back to the Basics series. So for the last couple of months, we've done just a 101 series on VAS, DRAS, and all things Veeam. So today is going to be an extension of our Back to the Basics series, and we're going to be talking about the best free backup planning tools on the web. And I know our guys are looking forward to this because it's a little bit of show and tell, and Steven's going to demo each of them and show you how to use it. So if you have any questions at all, put them in chat, and we'll make sure to answer them. So there's some great stuff in the presentation today. If you happen to miss anything or need to leave early, whatever, we will have the replays available on both Facebook and YouTube and our website at globaldatavault.com/webinars. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce our team. Invisible, we have the lovely Leslie Ferris. She is a moderator in the chat, so send her all of your questions. And then today we have Kelly Caldwell, who is Service Delivery Manager for Global Data Vault, and Stephen New, who is a Senior Support Manager for us. They are super smart, and I can't wait to see what they're going to share with you today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Trista. This is going to be a little bit more of a fun webinar for us. A lot of times we get to talking about words and say a lot of things and maybe show you some pictures. And today we're actually going to show you real live stuff. You know, we talk about free backup tools. This is really more of a planning session, what you'd use to plan for backups. We get asked a lot, how do I know how much bandwidth I need, or how many restore points can I keep? And I've got this amount of storage, how much backup storage do I need, or this amount of data, etc. So we're going to run through some tools today that will show you how you can calculate that. We use these tools all the time, so it's not something that we're unfamiliar with. And certainly Stephen, as a Veeam certified architect, is familiar with them. But we use these tools to enhance the solution, fill in the gaps, give you different views. You know, sometimes it's not just about having a view of the data you're trying to protect. We need to look at your CPU resources or your network or your disk latency and things like that. And then we solve problems, and sometimes those problems aren't known. A lot of times we'll come up with questions that if you tried to come up with it on your own, it would be difficult to answer. So these tools will help, and we're going to show those to you today. So we're going to start off with a workload sizing tool. Now, anytime you see these links that are at veambp.com, these are not associated with Veeam. They are created by Veeam solutions architects in the Veeam community, but it's independently produced. We have a couple of those today, and we just wanted to be clear that this isn't BP, bestpractices.veeam.com, it's veambp.com and not associated or affiliated. But the workload sizing tool does just that. So it looks at your production data and gives you an idea of what type of data storage you need, what type of repositories you would need based on your requirements. You've got the link here, and I think Stephen's ready to show us the first tool and how it works.
Yes, I am. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So you should see the work size estimator or VSE tool on the screen. So
Yep.
Whenever you go to this site, it's going to bring you to your dashboard, and it's going to tell you to add a workload. So a workload is actually your backup jobs. So this is going to be an active workload. The workload name, we're just going to go ahead and call it main job. And then it's going to be a VMware. We do have the option of VMware agent as the backup type. So we're going to go ahead and choose VMware. And then we have site A, site B. So any backup copies by design is going to go to site B. Your main jobs are going to go to site A. So your source terabyte, we'll go ahead and leave that at 10. And then for your quantity on VMs, we'll say that you have 10 VMs. You want to go ahead and do an 8-hour backup window. Your yearly growth is going to be between, normally Veeam's best practices are 3 to 5% on yearly growth. We'll go ahead and leave it at 5. And then your scope for retention, we're going to go ahead and leave it 3 years. You can drop this to 1 year, which would be roughly about 12 monthlies, but we'll leave it for 3 years for this demonstration. Your change rate is going to be about 5%, and your reduction is normally 50% because you get a one-to-one compression ratio. We are not going to use per VM files, and then we always use REFS or XFS for any Linux hardened repositories. And then for your backup job, we're going to go ahead and give it 18 restore points. Since that is Global Data Vault standard retention for your main backup job, we always configure it for 18 restore points that runs between 6 a.m. and 9:59 p.m. For this example, we're going to disable the remote copy and then just click Add Workload. Then once you click Add Workload, you can go ahead and click Calculate. Now, the cool thing about this tool is it will actually size your Veeam server for you. The biggest issue that we see when customers call in regarding performance or any bottlenecks or my job's running slow is the actual Veeam server is not sized up to specification. So this will actually tell you exactly what those resources be. So for the 10 VMs that we added and the 10 terabytes of data, you would require 4 cores, 8 gigs of RAM. That is just for your Veeam backup and replication server. So if you're running an all-in-one server, an example is if you have Veeam and SQL installed on the same machine, you would need an additional 2 cores and then 4 gigs of RAM for the SQL server. So right there at a bare minimum, that is 8 cores and 12 gigs of RAM. And then it would also give you your repository capacities based on the retention that we put in, which is going to be 18.19 terabytes. So the per site repository totals, so each repository or each Veeam backup and replication server by default is a proxy. If you add any additional proxies based on the workload that we added, you can add any additional proxies, which would require 4 cores and 8 gigs of RAM per proxy for the 10 servers, 10 terabytes. Your repository, which is where you would store the data, would require 2 cores and 10 gigabytes of RAM. So right there, just alone, we're at roughly 24 gigs of RAM. 22 gigs of RAM, and then we're at about 10 cores just for a Veeam backup server, SQL server, repository, and proxy for the workload that we selected. So the virtual proxy, this is actually if you have a virtualized environment running VMware, if you want to run hot add, it will actually give you your cores and your RAM for a virtualized proxy. And then also if you have your physical proxy and a physical repository, it will give you your cores and your RAM for your physical proxy and repository. Now keep in mind, up here, you do have a virtual proxy and a virtual repository, or you can do a physical proxy and a physical repository. So this is very important. If you notice that the repositories require the same amount roughly, whether it be a physical proxy or a repository. So an example, also a good thing about this site is if you have any questions regarding any of this information, you can click on the role name and it will tell you it will take you to VM Best Practices website. Kelly mentioned at the first of this call that the VM Best Practices website is bp.veeam.com. So this is the official documentation, and it will actually give you the best design scenario for the placement of your server, the deployment method, whether you virtual, physical, and so forth. So that is the VM sizing tool just at a glance. If you want, you can also go into workloads and add additional, go in here and edit this. And if you wanted to see what a backup copy would add, you could go in here and add this. So you can do 10 daily restore points and then 1 monthly. We'll go ahead and add a weekly in there. And you can just update. And then whenever you click calculate, it will actually update your site B. Like I said, your backup copies automatically go to site B. So once we add the backup copy in there, it will adjust your site B resources, and then you can see that the capacity has gone to 17.32 terabytes for your backup copy, and that is storing 10 restore points, 1 weekly and 1 monthly. So that is the VM sizing estimator at a glance. So I'll go ahead and hand it back over, and then we'll go ahead and discuss the next tool.
So that's pretty cool, and all these tools are mostly customizable, and not every user or company is the same, right? They're going to have different amounts of storage and different retention policies, different amounts of change rates, things like that, so that they can just put all this in and have a really good overview and insight about their organization. And there's really no questions. A lot of the times these tools prevent bad things from happening if you do them before time. So if you undersize your backup environment, suddenly you can't back up all of your data. You can't keep what you need. You could lose data. So hopefully you'll take some of this today and use it in your environment, and feel free to let us know what you think. The next tool that we're going to talk about, now that we understand the workload, is going to be how much bandwidth we need to be able to transfer that data, not necessarily just to the cloud, but maybe intrasite, intersite as well. The bandwidth calculator, again, is heavy math, which I don't like, so I'm glad all these tools are out there. But Tim de Win is a well-known VM solutions architect in the Netherlands. And Stephen, I think, is ready to show us how the bandwidth calculator works. I think he's just getting it over on his other screen real quick. And you're muted, Stephen.
Calculator that we have here is just basically all that it does is you actually put in your copy interval, you put in your data reduction and or compression, your change rate, and then your data size. So let's say that you want to calculate 5 terabytes of data and you want to send that in an 8-hour window. It would roughly take a connection that is 728.18 megabits a second, and it would transfer 2.5 terabytes. The reason for that is because you do have a 2 times or a 50% compression ratio, and then you have a 100% change rate. So this would cut your transfer in half. So if we drop the compression ratio to 1x, then you'll show that it will actually transfer the full 5 terabytes. But normally with Veeam, you'll see about anywhere between 2 to 2.5 compression. So you'll roughly transfer about 2.22 terabytes. Keep in mind that your data is deduped and or compressed. And then that will actually reduce the data transfer rate to Global Data Vault. But you can also go in here, and if you wanted to transfer in a 24-hour period, it would roughly take 215.76 megabits a second to transfer 2.22 terabytes of data to Global Data Vault. So this is a great tool that will actually show you how long it does take that data to transfer to Global Data Vault. Let's say that you're fresh into the implementation or you need to reseat your backup jobs. This will give you a rough estimate of how long that would take to send the data here to Global Data Vault.
Yeah, so this is really helpful if you want to know, is my bandwidth fast enough? And keep in mind that we do talk about upload speeds when we're doing this. This has no, your download speed has no bearing on this. You do need a synchronous or at least a higher, you can't do like 100 megs down and 5 megs up and expect it to work quickly. So you have to take that into consideration. But yeah, if you need your backups to get off site, to get transferred in a certain amount of time, this is a great tool to show you just how much bandwidth you need to be able to do that.
I'll go ahead and hand it back over.
So the next, excuse me, dry air here in Texas today. The next tool we're going to talk about is the Restore Point Simulator. And, we're kind of building along here. We've seen the workload simulator, we've seen the bandwidth calculator, and now we're going to talk about restore points. And this is more of the data sizes, how many retention points I'm going to need, what the data is going to look like when it lands. And we have a couple of different ways to model this based on the type of backups you're taking, whether it's forever incrementals or incrementals, et cetera, whether it's a backup copy job or a local job. And we always try to simulate, REFS, which we get some file savings on that Windows file system like that. Lots of cool options in this one. So I'm going to hand it back over to Stephen. He'll show us how the Restore Point Simulator works.
All right. So the Restore Point Simulator, very easy tool to use. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and choose your quick preset at the top. We always do forever forward incremental here at GDV. Your style type, you do have a option of incremental, reverse incremental, VM replica, or backup copy job. So we're going to go ahead and use our standard configuration that we configure at Global Data Vault, which is going to be a forever forward incremental backup. So we're going to go ahead and choose that the use size in gigabytes is going to be 10 terabytes. So we're going to go ahead and leave it at 1,000 gigabytes. And then the restore points, we're going to go ahead and put this at 18, which is going to be our standard. And then normally we see about a 10% compression ratio. So, 10% change rate. And then we're going to go ahead and leave it we're going to leave it for 2.5. Your data left after reduction is we normally see between 2.2 and 2, but we'll go ahead and leave it at 2.5 for this example. And then for now, we're going to go ahead and leave your interval at daily. Keep in mind that here at Global Data Vault, we run your backups every 4 hours between 6 a.m. and 9:59 p.m. So we'll go ahead and set it. This is our standard configuration that we configure all customers. 18 restore points every 4 hours. So if you click simulate, this will actually give you the retention that you would use for your main job. Keep in mind, this is one job. So you would have a VBK or a full or a base image, and then you would have 17 VIBs. So if you click on the actual gigabytes, it will tell you exactly how long that will take to transfer 100 gigabytes and then 800 gigabits. So it'll roughly take about 28.4 megabits and then a speed of 227.6 megabytes or megabits. I got those backwards. And then it will actually give you the speed for 4 hours, 8 hours. So this is just your main job. So we would roughly use about 10.8 terabytes, and then you would have 420 gigs as a working space. And then if you click on it, you can actually see that it would have one full 17 incrementals. Your average size is going to be 400 gigs, and your average incremental size is going to be 40. It would also give your max file size, your max incremental size, and then your total size, which basically matches the number down at the bottom. So working space is going to be for any merges, GFS restore points, any synthetic operations on the back end. If you're running fast clone with a forever forward chain, it will actually merge the data back into the base or the incremental. So you would need 420 gigs of working space. also, whenever we configure these jobs, we also configure a backup copy job. So what this is this is actually a local copy, excuse me, and it goes to the LDV or the Veeam backup server that is normally on site. Our standard retention for the local copy is going to be 10 restore points. Our backup copy jobs run on a continuous schedule that runs on a copy interval that runs every night between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So these restore points would be daily restore points. So you would have 10 daily restore points, and then by default, we would choose 1 monthly. And then you would go ahead and simulate, and then it would give you your retention for your local copy job. So this is just your local copy. You would have a full VBK that at 400 gigs, and then you would have a full VBK for your monthly for the retention here. And then you would have, this is actually going to be your retention file, which is your 1 monthly. And then you would have a full VBK, and this is going to be your chain. So you would have 1 VBK, 9 VIBs. And then the same with the main backup job, it would actually give you the speeds and also how long it would take to transfer the different amount of data. At the both, it will give you your incremental and also your full transfer rates. So the last backup job that we do that we send to GDV is going to actually be your remote copy to GDV, which is going to be a backup copy job as well. Now this used gigabytes is actually going to be the same. We're going to be doing 10 terabytes for this example. You store 10 restore points. The backup copies that go to Global Data Vault are also run on a continuous schedule or a incremental basis. So it actually runs on a copy interval. So we run these from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day. Keep in mind that your primary job runs from 6 a.m. to 9:59 p.m. So we do run these from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then we store 3 monthlies on the Global Data Vault side, which is our standard retention. And then we go ahead and simulate, and then this will actually give you your working space on the Global Data Vault side. So our standard retention would be 1, 2, 3 monthlies, and these would be 400 gigs each. And then you would have a base image, which would be, you would have 1 VBK and then 9 VIBs, just like your local copy. And then you would have 19 terabytes roughly on the Global Data Vault side, and then that would roughly be about 23.8 after all said is done, landing here at Global Data Vault, and that is including retention. So this is a great size estimator that will actually help you size your repository so that you don't run out of space, and also to give you a good estimate on what you would be using on the Global Data Vault side as well with our standard retention.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And when we talk to folks about how much cloud space they'll need, we use this tool. We don't make guesses about it. We show the numbers and we use this tool. It's really helpful, like you said, to determine how much space you'll need locally too for those initial backups. You always have to leave that working space or that overhead for your backups to run properly. And sometimes we do see customers and end users who buy just as much storage as they need, and they fill it up with just a little bit and then wonder why their backups have issues. And it's probably because there's not enough of that working space. So this is really helpful for that. Our next tool, so far we've talked about the workload simulator, the bandwidth calculator, the restore point simulator, and the thing that's going to make all of those talk is going to be the ports, your networking. So Veeam backup and replication and all of its components use similar ports, but then there's also ones that aren't so similar, and we don't always know which ports we need to open on firewalls or between servers or between the cloud and your data center. So what this tool does is it goes in and identifies the services that you need and that you want to use and shows you what ports those are and allows you to display that in a report. So this again is a Veeam best practices find on veeambp.com, not bp.veeam.com. I know that's a hard one to say multiple times. but we'll see. Let Stephen show us how we can identify the ports with the tool and then export it for future reference.
Yeah, so the VMware Ports tool is going to be very simple. All that it does is it's just a directory, a ports directory that'll tell you which ports that you need to open. So you would need to choose the application group, VMware, Hyper-V, AD Explorer, SQL Explorer, and then you would choose your backup server, and then or your backup source service, which would be backup server, and then choose VMware for this example, and then your target service would be ESXi server, vCenter server. So we're going to go ahead and choose the backup server. The reason for this is our commonly used service at Global Data Vault. Everybody accesses the backup server and the backup server service. Say that 3 times real fast. So we're going to go ahead and click run, and this is going to give you your default ports that you need to open for Veeam. So by default, you would need to open port 9501, port 9509. So we can go ahead and change this to the vCenter server, and keep in mind that every time you run these, you can add them, and it would put ports in report server at the bottom. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and export these later. So every time you add a target service, so let's go ahead and just choose the vCenter server service. So we're going to need to open 443 and then the HTTPS 10.443 for vCenter, and then also the default ports. So we can go ahead and add these to our list, and it will keep track of all the ports that you need to open. And then we'll go ahead and choose an example is we want to go ahead and add a backup proxy. So this would require ports 9501, 9509, 443, 10.443, and then we can go ahead and add these ports, and then it will add the ports down here to the list. So we're going to go ahead and choose a backup proxy up here, backup proxy service, and then go ahead and run these. So these are all the ports that you would need to open for the backup proxies. So we can go ahead and add these to our list. So it will continue to give us a list of ports that we would need to open as we build our service up. So if we wanted to go in here, if we wanted to add a repository, we can do a Windows Server repository, go ahead and run that. So we would need ports 2500 through 3300 open. So by default, Veeam uses 2500 through 5000 TCP. So we can go ahead and add these, and then it will continuously grow our list of ports that we need to open, and we can go ahead and add these ports into our firewall. And then if you want these for later, you can go ahead and export the ports out as well.
That's pretty cool. You know, a lot of organizations have separate networking groups or separate IT, you know, cybersecurity or IT security groups. And just to be able to hand them a report, hand them say, here's the ports we need, is pretty powerful. Or you know, for us to be able to share that with you is really good to have. I don't know about you, Stephen, but I can't remember all those ports. Even if I did it every day, I probably wouldn't be able to remember all of those. So it's good to have a reference for that. The next tool that we're going to talk about is called RV Tools, and it stands for the name of Rob. I'm not going to mispronounce his last name, but he's an infrastructure engineer from the Netherlands. These tools are really well known. They give you information about your VMware environment. And if you've seen Veeam One or you've seen, you know, vCenter reporting, it's similar to that, but it's a very lightweight tool. It's very easy to use, and you can get the information delivered to you in several formats. Uses a lot of tabs, gives you things like CPU utilization, data store utilization, your IOPS, that type of thing. All these tools still are free, and Mr. Rob has his own site, robware.net, that you can get these from. I forget which company he works for, but he is an infrastructure engineer in the Netherlands. If you ever tried to guesstimate what type of resources you need in your virtual environment, you know it can be very difficult, especially over time. And this is a great free tool to help with that. We use this specifically for like virtual machine replication. How many resources are you going to need to be able to perform disaster recovery failovers for your environment, and et cetera. So I think Stephen's ready to demo this tool for us, our RV tool, Stephen. You're muted again.
This is a tool that will actually give you the resources for your VMs. So what I brought up for you here today is just Global Data Vault's demo environment where we perform testing on patches, different VM versions. So what we're going to do is it will actually give you a vInfo. This is an overview of the layout in VMware. It'll give you your powered on state, your config status, whether it's green, red, DNS name, connection state, whether the guest or the VM is running or not. It will also give you a heartbeat, which is yellow or green. Anything that is red is bad. It'll tell you when it was powered on, the creation date, the version, CPUs and memory, which is very important, especially if you're using our replication product, or if you want to use our replication product. What we do is we do a 1-for-1 resource match. So if you have 8 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of memory, we would need to provision that on the Global Data Vault side. So normally, whenever you do sign up for a replication service, we'll have you do an RV tools dump or just an export of the RV tools and send this to us. That way we can go ahead and provision your machines for you, or provision the resources to match what you have in your environment. It'll also give you your virtual NICs, how many disks are attached, and then it will also give you your IP address, and then
it goes on and on.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, you could go you could go into this thing for hours and hours and hours. So basically, it would, if you want to see what's in the vInfo tab, like I said, this is an overview of all these tabs at the top. The good feature about this is you can actually drill down to find your sockets, your cores, your Macs, whether it's normal, high, shares, also your memory. This is a good tab to see if you're what you're using versus consumed, which is a very helpful tool that we use internally here at Global Data Vault, just to make sure that you're not overrunning memory on any of your servers, and then also your disk, your partitions, and probably the biggest one is your network adapter. So normally what we try to do is we try to configure everything on VMX Net 3, because that does support up to 10 gigs. And then your E1000s will go on, will be able to support up to 1 gig. And then also, if you want just to dump all this information into a spreadsheet, you could just go to Export All Excel and just save it on your desktop. And it will go through all these tabs for you. And it will dump this into a spreadsheet for you to where you can pull it up in Excel and then access all this information that you see on these tabs in Excel for you. So this is a very helpful tool. So this did just go ahead and export the information to Excel for me. And you notice it has all the tabs at the bottom exactly how we have it in RV Tools, which has all the information. So normally we would just request that you send us the vInfo tab, and then this can help us provision any resources for replication on the Global Data Vault side, and then also your vCPU and vMemory. But that's RV Tools. It's an excellent tool for both helping to provision as well as find issues in your environment. Maybe you're overrunning memory on a VM. You can go ahead and check that on the vMemory tab. So.
Yeah, it's always helpful to have quick glances at things, because we all know as administrators that there's a lot of information out there, and remembering where to go for all of it can be daunting, especially if you're working with different hypervisors and different systems. Just knowing where to get that information is hard. So RV Tools can definitely save you some time with that. The last tool that we are going to talk about is the RAID calculator. Now, we all know, but this is a back to basics. So RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. And what that does is allows you to determine if you have how many hard drives at what size, how much of that is actually usable. We know that with RAID, you have some type of a penalty as part of parity for data protection, so that you can tolerate a hard drive failure or something like that. That's why RAID was created, basically, was to prevent data loss. So we can see some performance gains with different types of RAID. We'll be able to see the amount of storage that you have usable based on the number and size of your hard disk and what type of read and write benefits you get, if any. So this is raid-calculator.com. If you get an error, it is just HTTP. There's no HTTPS on that one. So be sure to check that if you go visit the site. And Steve is going to show us how it works.
Yeah, so what we're going to go ahead and do is just share my screen briefly, and then it will take you to raidcalculator.com. So how this works is you just put in your number of disks. So we're going to go ahead and put in 24 disks. We normally use 10U servers here at Global Data Vault, and then we'll use 10 terabytes as an example. And then we go ahead and set a RAID 6 double parity, and we'll go ahead and click calculate. So what this will do is this will actually give you your capacity, your read speed, and if you notice that you have no write gain speed here, and then you have a 2-drive failure here. So what that means is you can lose 2 hard drives and your RAID will still be intact. So if you lose a third, you lose the RAID. So the another good example is if you do a RAID 10 mirrored strike and go ahead and click calculate, you notice that you have 24 read and your 12x write speed. So this will actually let you gain both additional read and write speed. But if you notice, you also lose 100 terabytes here.
Yeah.
So and you also you have 1 drive failure. So whenever you calculate these RAID arrays, you need to make sure that the speed gain and also the capacity, there's going to be a performance hit in there versus what RAID you use. And a good example is like I mentioned, RAID 6, you can lose more disk, but you're also getting no write speed, and you're also losing 100 terabytes on your capacity. So is that 1 drive failure worth losing the 100 terabytes and getting no write speed gain? So that's something that you're going to have to determine. You design your plan on which RAID arrays that you would use. So that is the RAID tool in a brief summary. So also, if you notice the RAID 5, you would actually gain 10 terabytes. But normally, I like to have both read and write gain, especially if your server is going to be doing a lot of processing and writes, or read and IOP processing. That would actually help you gain a lot of speed. So this is just the RAID calculator. It'll tell you how many disks you need. Just put in your number of disks, disk size, which would be 8. Then you do a RAID 10, calculate. It'll give you your size and capacity after it puts it into a RAID. So this is another cool utility that helps us determine the proper RAIDs and what we need for the customer.
Yeah, this is pretty cool and big too for if you're using, in your production environment, maybe something like a lot of SQL databases or a lot of database servers. Transaction logs are constantly being written and read. A lot of times SQL designers will say, put your transaction logs on a RAID 10 set, put your actual database on a RAID 6 or something like that. And you can adjust the different types of RAID that you have depending on your performance needs. But again, we want to talk about proper planning. You can't buy 24 hard drives of a certain size and expect to get 24 hard drives worth of space just because of those penalties. And if you put it in RAID 10 and you look at the numbers, you say, well, why doesn't this equal 240 terabytes, right? Well, it's because you're splitting the drives, basically. You're having the amount of data that you are able to use based on that. So that's cool. Really easy way to understand that. So that's all for the tools that we have. We demoed 6 of them. These are all planning tools, right? None of these things will do backups on their own, but they help you to plan your backups, your disaster recovery environment. You know, like Steven's talked about, we use these all the time for one thing or another. We will have a summary about this. You can get the links in the summary on our website in the near future. So I guess right now, I just give us a quick overview of Global Data Vault. We are a full-service DRaaS backup as a service Office 365 backup provider. We are cloud-based, so everything that we do is in the Global Data Vault cloud. We are 100% Veeam, powered by Veeam data protection, and we support VMware Hyper-V and Acropolis, which is the Nutanix hypervisor, physical servers, and endpoints as well. So, are there any questions, Trista?
I don't see any questions. So you must have done an amazing job, Stephen. Thank you so much. So I do think that wraps up for today. We appreciate everybody's time. If you have any questions afterwards, go ahead and send them to sales@globaldatavault.com. We'll have the replay and the registration for our next webinar in November, which is how to build a great cybersecurity program on a budget. So registrations are open. You can visit us at globaldatavault.com/webinars to sign up for that today. Thanks so much.
Alrighty, thanks for the time.
Thanks.